I think it's important to understand where I'm coming from, so you can understand how this work started to happen, how Borderclick started to happen. So, well, I am an artist. I do consider myself a transporter artist. Being transporter, like like being from both sides of the border. I grew up like part of my life in Tijuana, the other part of my life in San Diego. For different in different times of my life, I've lived in San Diego and gone to school in San Diego, and then other times like I've lived in Tijuana and across the school. Even we go to school in San Diego, and then years later, like worked and all that stuff, navigating both worlds. Right now, I'm in Tijuana, Mexico, right now. So this world, I mean, has changed so much that it allows for this kind of stuff to happen. Before, we didn't have these types of conversations. So this is great. So being transporter, the first time I ever heard the word transporter as being used as a form of to describe a person, as a form of identity, was around 2016, 2015, when we started working on Borderclick. And I never really thought about what transporter actually was. It never crossed my mind, because I had been crossing the border since I was 5 years old. I remember the border before it was hyper militarized, when you could literally just go up to an officer and be like, I'm a U.S. citizen, and that was enough to cross the border. I still remember those days. So I've been able to see the development of the border from a lived experience of crossing it almost every day since I was 5 years old to go to school. And my family comes from both my parents are from Sinaloa, Mexico. So this experience of crossing the border to go to school was a completely new experience for them as well. It wasn't, but since it was less militarized, it didn't feel like this big barrier. At least my perception when I was younger, I didn't see that. But as we all know, through time, this border doesn't get dismantled. It keeps changing. But from what I've seen, it just keeps getting more and more militarized. And I just never really thought about these things. So when I decided, I'm gonna take a step back a little bit, kind of dive into what it meant for me to be living life like that. It always made me really hyper aware in a way, because I had to like speak to Border Patrol agents with guns, and my parents would make me lie. They had me lie about like where we were going, because my mom had a visa. She couldn't live in San Diego, but she was also living undocumented for a while. So like all these things, I would constantly have to be lying to the Border Patrol, and always had to be like on edge. I always kind of felt a little bit on edge, and I don't think I really understood how much that was, like I said, until years later, the level of anxiety that gave me, and why it makes me so like, right now I can be calm, and sometimes I'm like super intense. I think it's the nature of being a transporter, and the transporter community. We always have to be like moving around, and it's like, I think it's a good trait to have. I see it as something like something of value, being able to navigate a space like that. I think it's valuable, but can also be super exhausting. So that really shaped the way I started living my life young. When I was in middle school, high school, is when I started realizing, well, after 9/11, 2001, when that happened, that was like, it changed everything. I suddenly saw the world as global. Like, I finally understood. The internet was barely like accessible. We barely had internet. It was barely coming out. They would send you free CDs. Remember those free CDs? And you could just like put in your computer and give like 15 minutes of internet or something like that. Like, it was a completely different time. And when
I think you might have to explain to some students what CDs are. No, just kidding. Raise your hand if you know what CDs are.
I was also thinking of like how young folks are in this room, actually.
Raise your hand if you've never heard of a CD.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I still buy CDs. Yeah, exactly. Those AOL CDs that I'm talking about, exactly. Those same ones. And well, during that era, of this like globalization, like communication, rapid communication. Well, 9/11 happened. That moment in life, and like everything, it was like mass media was covering it. Everything like was shut down. It was the first time that I had ever like known of the border being shut down. Like, I was I was in 7th grade, I think, or 8th grade. No, I was in 8th grade when that happened. And I'm middle school, and it was like the first time they closed the border, and I was like, okay, this is like, what's going on? This is weird. You know, everybody was scared. Like there was all this fear being communicated like all over mass media, like everything. Everybody was afraid. I remember my dad, he couldn't cross into the U.S. and I was living in the U.S. at that time. And my dad was like, yo, like if like we were preparing to leave the U.S. and like and go into Tijuana. No, that was like a plan at that moment. And for the first time in that time is when I really saw like the impact that this border actually had in people's lives based on what I had just felt and what I had seen and all these other friends and all my other friends who had all lived similar experiences. And my parents were suddenly like also like, okay, what are we gonna do? Like, what's gonna happen? Everybody started thinking of this border in a different way. I started seeing its huge and global impact, and I started realizing like, yo, like there's something bigger than what I thought this actually meant. And I was in 8th grade around this time, and well, the border super got militarized, like instant. It was instant. One day to the next, more military. They were putting up barriers, like everything. You know, like they had everything. It seemed like they just had everything ready for it to go up. You know, it was that fast. It didn't take that much time for that to happen, like in a day. You know, and I would see it. I was seeing it, and I was seeing it. And during this time, I was crossing the border with my 2 brothers, walking. We're all minors. You know, I was 13, I think. My older brother was 14, and my younger brother 12. So we're like this kids walking across the border because my parents, well, my mom lived in San Diego. She couldn't cross into Tijuana. She was living undocumented, and my dad couldn't cross into the U.S. because he didn't have a visa. So we would walk. We would just walk it, and it was still like a thing, you know. And I started seeing this like actually seeing the border being built and developed. Like I would see it every day on both sides, and suddenly I started getting treated differently. Not suddenly. I want to say suddenly. Maybe I'd never noticed it before, but I was being treated differently by CBP, by officers and things like that, because 3 kids walking around. You know, everybody was scared, even of the kids, and I started being treated differently for the first time. That part of my development, right when I was going into high school, really, like I got kicked out of high school. So I ended up getting kicked out of high school because of this divide that suddenly separated, not suddenly, but like not just me, but my family. Like all these people were like split, having to navigate this. I was suddenly the time to cross a border went insane. Like I don't remember doing more than an hour at some point in my life, and I thought that was a lot. But suddenly we're doing 2-hour border traffic, you know, and that was so exhausting. It was so exhausting to me while I was in high school and growing and like trying to live my life. You know, it was super exhausting, and because of that, I stopped going to school. I just didn't want to go. Like I was just like, oh my God, I have to cross the border again today. I just stopped going. And I mean, I would go sometimes. I would lie to my parents, like, oh yeah, I'm going to school, whatever. And I'd be in Tijuana. And like I wanted to live in Tijuana again. I went back to Tijuana. And around that time when all this happened, I ended up getting kicked out of high school because I stopped going. And I ended up graduating from like an independent studies program. And at that moment, during that time when all of this was like going on, I really thought about like what I wanted to do with my life, because I was graduating high school, like in this other system. I was told that I was never going to be able to go to college and stuff like that. You know, people were trying to force me to make decisions that I was not able to make at 18 years old. You know, like student loans and stuff like that. Like there's all these people like preying on you in a way. They were like preying on me, and I was like, yo, like I don't even know, you know. And I had never actually seen myself as an artist. It's very, I mean, I'm going to say recent, but I guess in the last 10 years, I started calling myself an artist and being and presenting myself as an artist and believing that I am an artist. Something that I want to share today with y'all, and we're going to see some of my work. I want to, in a way, like, this might not be, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like demystify the idea of what it's like to be an artist, like what it actually, because there's all these types of artists that we know, and I think I learned how to like live from it, you know, how to actually live as an artist. And kind of like what we're going to talk about is also like, how do I actually implement it in real life? Like, what does it mean to actually do it? And like practice without theory, you know, and theory with practice. Like, what does it mean to just go without knowing? Like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And then going with knowledge. What does that mean? What are those two different things? And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that. From that point, a lot of things happened in my life. My older brother, he passed away when he was 23 years old. I was 22. And during that time, this was like, everything changed again for me. Everything changed again for me. And I started really thinking about what it meant for me to live. That's it. I started questioning life. Like, why am I living? What am I doing? Like, I was studying business administration, like at that time, you know. And I was like, do I want to just like run a business? Is that what I'm trying to do? Like, am I trying to just make money, or like what makes me happy? And that's when I started thinking, you know, like I really like making music, and I always like drawing. I always like watching film. I always wanted to learn how to like do good photography, because back then we didn't have cameras on the phones. Like, you needed to have an actual camera to take a photo. And that was like, even that was like a thing, like, oh, I need to carry a camera, like stuff like that, you know. And when I asked myself, like, was my brother happy when he passed away? The answer was like, he was not happy when he passed away. Like, am I happy right now? And my answer was like, no, I'm not happy right now. So what am I going to do to be happy? And that's when I decided that I was going to focus completely on doing things that made me happy. And one of those things was like pursuing art, pursuing photography, pursuing film. I always wanted to make movies. Since I've always liked movies. I love sci-fi. I love all types of movies. I like photography. I'm not necessarily like a big, like all my friends who are filmmakers who know about all these films and all these names. I'm not like that. I just enjoy, like, one of my friends was one of the best filmmakers. I know he always told me, dude, you want to learn film? Just watch movies. Like, that's it. Like, you don't even have to go to school for that. That's what he told me. And he's really good. And I've never went to school for film, but I always wanted to like, to go more into that. And that's when I started doing photography. I started working. I switched careers, and I went to Southwestern. I just went from Tijuana again back to San Diego, because I was at UABC studying, and I went back to San Diego. UABC is the state college, I know.
We also have UABC in Mexicali. So
yes,
UABC
exactly.
Tijuana and UABC Mexicali as well.
Yeah, so I was going to UABC in Tijuana, and I started going to Southwestern College, community college in San Diego, and I was studying, and for the first time I studied like something made of art that I wanted to study. And well, I had studied music before, but it wasn't the same. It was mostly self-taught. But photography, I took my first photo class ever. It was darkroom photography 101. I failed that class. They failed me for that class. And I now I teach photo, you know, like, it's crazy how it works.
We wouldn't believe it. Seeing your work, we would not believe that.
Yeah, my film, because film is different, because you got to develop in a dark room, you know. It's different than digital, and there's a lot of like technique behind that. And I guess I was being graded for the technique, not necessarily for the concepts. But I learned. And I started like really getting into photography. I ended up studying graphic design. I got a bachelor's in graphic design. I went into the media arts. The internet was like blowing up. Smartphones had just come out. Like, it was everywhere. And I was like, I saw something there, and I was like, yo, like, the internet. This is where something's happening with the internet and smartphones. So I wanted to study graphic design. I want to make digital art. I still wanted to use photography and all that. And I really wanted to dive into the digital world, which is why like all of that, like, technology really does dictate a lot of the work that I do, for sure. I like playing around with technology. There's a lot of resources out there, free ones as well. I'm always happy to share resources, by the way. If anyone is interested in anything, if I say you want to learn more about it, like, hit me up. And so can I share my screen now? I'm gonna jump into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also this is a great intermission. If anybody wants to grab that té or café, go for it now. I am gonna actually do that myself right now. But also any questions for Josemar as of now? Just, you know, listening to his trajectory, but also positionality for his work. So for my students, we also apply this approach to this critical consciousness as educators, and more specifically at the Borderlands. And one of the important components of this this approach and this lens that we bring to this work is looking inward and looking into our own experiences, and that how does that affect or influence our day-to-day. So my students, the students here today that are very shy, but I know they're there, Also also address their positionality, and also we're using as well photo voice for specifically what is called autoethnography, and for them to reflect on their experiences and what does that mean in education, and then what does that mean for to being a critical educator, but also as we analyze these policies, practices that have been unfortunately oppressive and unjust for many communities of color, just within the context of the U.S. and also undeniably at the U.S. Mexico borderlands. It's also looking at our own experience as people of color for most of us, and what we've been through, and then it gives us, I think, a more, I would like to say, a more profound lens towards when engaging in the literature and this study. But also positionality is very important, and it's actually a core component of the class and the assignment that they're doing. So for my class, and also just for guests from the community that are here, any questions for Josemar before we transition on to the next component of this session? And if you have questions, you're welcome to either unmute yourself or just type your questions in the chat box. Okay, and Alanis has a comment here.
Yeah, it is nerve-wracking. To this day, I hate it.
Yeah, and that was, unfortunately my experience as well. I think for a lot of us transfronterizos, that's why I'm like I just never lied, because I had to do it too much growing up. So to be very honest and real, and how I carry myself in the world. But yeah, it's difficult. And also for those of you who have chosen your topic for specifically the population of our transborder students in the midterm, critically analyzing why that is, and why is it that we have to experience that, and then what are some policies that perhaps can ameliorate that, but also need to be applied in various different sectors of education. Like there's the AB 91 that just passed for the community colleges, but we also need it in the CSUs. And we also have an assembly bill for K through 12, and I'll share that with you all as well if you want to dive into that. But right, great. So I guess no questions for now, but if questions come up, please feel free to type them here in the chat box or simply unmute yourself. But yeah, Josemar, please go ahead and share your screen. And I'll also make you co-host here.
Yes, I see your question, and I'm going to answer that question for sure during this presentation. Give me a sec. Okay, you guys can see, yeah?
Yes.
So the question that you're asking is like, how do you set yourself? How do you like show your work, and or like stand out from this like huge wave of people who have cameras? Just because you have a camera doesn't mean you're a photographer. Let's think about that. Think about that. No. What does it mean to be a photographer? Also, like if you say you're a photographer and you want to use just your phone to make photo, that's cool. I think that photography, or being an artist, part of that is also being very intentional. That is something that I learned, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that right now when we go through my portfolio. My portfolio it tells a story. I consider myself a storyteller as well. Sometimes I introduce myself as an artist, storyteller. And I think that the story that I have, or I know now that the story that I have actually has impact on other folks, which is why I get invited to speak about it. I never really thought about it like that. So during that time, when I was like studying graphic design and media arts, I started doing an internship with a nonprofit that still exists to this day. They're called the Aja Project. And there I was working I started working as a media artist part-time, and I was doing school. It was like an internship, a paid internship. So it was like a couple hours every week, and just like started doing stuff. And this organization specifically, they did a lot of work with photography. It was mostly photo-based. And I loved it. From the get-go, they did a lot of work with refugee and immigrant communities and narrative and storytelling. So instantly I was attracted to this organization. I was super lucky to be an intern there. And it was small. It was a very small organization when I started working there. I think there was maybe 6 people, 7 people, and they were all in a really small apartment. So it's like it's a nonprofit, you know, and they did great work there. I learned a lot about design. I learned about communication. I learned about a lot about photography, like a lot about photography. And we ran a lot of. I was there in that organization for 10 years, and we worked a lot with like I said, refugee and immigrant youth using photo, giving them cameras. That's the first time that I was able to experience what it was like to work in a classroom with cameras with other students. And like I said, I had failed photo, and I didn't really see myself as a photographer. I was mostly a designer, but I did have a camera. I knew how to use it technically. You know, I knew how it worked, how light comes in, comes out, like just technical little things here and there. I didn't have like a great camera. And I did have like a camera on my phone, but still was like super blurry. Like they say, it was like filming with a potato, you know. And so we used point and shoot cameras to give to students who were, like I said, mostly refugee and immigrant students. This organization started in 2002, I believe, is when they started. I think so. I think it was 2002 when it was founded. So when I was reading the stories, we did a lot of exhibitions. We would grab the photography that the students made, the participants, and the narrative, and it would be exhibited in different galleries, museums, community spaces. And when I was reading these stories for the first time, it really resonated with me. Like all these stories of like leaving home. That was like one of the biggest subjects: leaving home. What does it mean to be home? A lot of people talking about family separation. All these things that I had like experienced, and I never really talked about it or really analyzed it. And I was seeing it for the first time, like exhibited in museums and stuff like that. For the first time for me, you know, I was young. And in that process, I met a lot of creative people. Something that is important, and I want to emphasize throughout the whole presentation, is the importance of community, being in community, understanding that there's something that I understand, and it might not be true for everybody, but I truly believe that that the best things ever, the greatest things that man has ever done, have been in teams and in groups. Not just one person does it. There's always more people involved. You might not see them in the front, but there's always a lot of people involved. And that is something that I've learned, and it's something that I started seeing. And I started finding a community within that space. And there wasn't, but like I said, during that time, I had never heard of the word transporter. There wasn't a lot of people crossing the border necessarily. And it was something that I wouldn't disclose as much. I would keep a lot of it to myself. And I started being in community with other folks that were into photography, that were into activism, a lot of, like I said, refugee communities. And so there was a lot of that work. And I started meeting folks who were doing this type of work at the border, like activist work, like with people who had shelters, people who helped with immigrant law and stuff like that, like all these things. And I started seeing this world, and I was like, oh, there's a whole community. These people that know each other have, like, they've worked in the same organization. Someone says, it's like, there's like a network of this. I was able to discover that, and very young graphic designer. I later became creative director of that organization years later. And one of the things that pushed me, helped me grow in that was Borderclick, this project. In 2000, we founded Borderclick in 2016. And like Vanessa mentioned before, Borderclick is this trans-border archive of lived experiences, you know, people who cross the border every day. When that idea came up, as a friend of mine, a co-founder, Rebecca Goldsmith, we were working together at the Osher Project. She was teaching another class. She was an interesting trans-border person because she is from Chicago, but she's half Filipina and half German, and she spoke Spanish. So it was like, when I met her, I was like, I thought she was Mexican, right? I was like, oh, it's Mexicana, you know? And then she was like, well, actually, no, I'm from Chicago, like all these things. But she was living in Tijuana, and she would cross the border. So we met. Suddenly we were working together in this organization, and we started giving each other like ride. Oh, like hey, can I catch a ride? Like started helping each other out. And she was really, when we started talking, she was really interested in my background as a trans-border artist, like a trans-border person doing these things, you know? And that process with her, like she started asking me all these questions about what it was like. And I was like, I didn't see, I just thought I was like, well, whatever part of my life. And then she told me like, yo, like you should really do something with that. It's like your story means something. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, like I think other people would be interested. in doing something like that. And we just like we're good friends, and we just kind of talked about like that experience. We just shared that experience, just talking, just hanging out. She really liked photography as well. She's a photographer as well, and we decided to apply for a grant. We decided to apply for a grant, and I'm talking, giving out a lot of details because I want people to understand like the actual way of doing it. You know, and I'm not gonna go above that. Like, I need to talk about those things. We applied for a grant. We found a fiscal sponsor. A fiscal sponsor is another organization that helps, that pretty much gets the money from the grant and disperses to you and pays the taxes for it. Basically, that's all they're for. And we used the other part of the organization I was working for. We used them as a fiscal sponsor to help us apply for that grant. And it was, the first grant was called Artists in Communities. I think it was Artists. I think that's what it was called. I don't remember. It's a long time ago, 2016. Artist Activating Communities. That was the name. And we decided to do a project around transborderism. And she came up with this, like, well, she didn't come up with the word, but she was the first time she introduced me to this like transborder, like the word transborder. And she started referencing other scholars from the region that I had never met. And we started like really analyzing what it meant to do that in order to apply for this grant. And what I thought immediately was like, I would love to do something with photo and video with students that cross the border every day, because that's what I would have liked when I was in high school. That's what I thought. Okay, I would have never gone to get that in high school. Maybe still, but I would have had like a better chance if I had a program like Borderclick when I was in high school. 100% sure. I wasn't exposed to photography in that way, no. So we, in that process of applying for this grant, I feel like it was a long shot, honestly. I never thought we were going to get it, and we ended up getting the grant, and we were super happy about it. And I was like, oh damn, this is actually going to happen. Like we're gonna do this thing that I wanted to do as a kid. And I was like, this is gonna be great. We couldn't work with high school students at that time. It wasn't, the grant wasn't for that, but it was for working with transporter, anybody, basically, you know. And that's when I met Vanessa. Well, we had met previously, but I remember like it was during the time when we actually met and started working, when Vanessa wasn't still a member of Borderclick for sure, but she was an active member. Let's say it like that. Vanessa actually really helped us out in developing the curriculum. I remember talking to Rebecca when we were applying for the grant, and we got the grant, and we wanted to apply for it and all that. And I remember telling her like, yo, I met this person, Vanessa, that she likes doing this whole thing about transborderism, and she's like trying to like understand it. She's doing research around it. I was like, I don't know anybody doing that. Like, I told her that like we need to bring her to help us, like give us a language, you know, because I mean, I didn't have the language for transborderism. I'm not, like I said, I'm not necessarily like I mean, I guess you can say that I do work in academia, but there was different times también, no? So, and well, I want to start getting a little bit into the type of work that I do. So the stuff that you see here, this is some of the installation art that I've made through my time as an artist. And during this time, as you can see, some of the work, this was in the San Diego International Airport. During this time, we were developing Borderclick, because you get the grant, and then it takes time for you to get the money, and then you have like certain timelines you need to hit, right? So during that time, I was still developing myself as an artist, doing other work and other things, just kind of waiting for Borderclick to kick in. I didn't know what it was going to be like, and this is one of the projects that happened during that time. Or I think it was a little bit after Borderclick, but it was an installation that I did at the airport that involves storytelling. You can see these all photographs, and they all have stories. Famo, she's great. She's one of the greatest photographers I know. She's amazing. When nobody spoke my language, a girl named Iris would help me to understand the test and read to me, even though we didn't speak the same language. This is what she said. Like, dude, I felt the same way when I was a kid and didn't know any English. And I was like, my parents would send me to school, like knowing damn well I didn't speak any English. Like, they were like, tíralo ahí. Like, figure it out. And I was like, well, you know, like, oh, sorry, part of language. But like, you know, it was kind of like that. So it's a little bit of that work, and I want you to see this so that I can help kind of like contextualize all the other work that I did with that. So we got the grant for Borderclick. These are some of my photographs as well, though, and I'm going to jump directly into Borderclick. We got this grant with Borderclick, and we started developing it. I'm going to scroll through it a little bit, go slowly, and I'm going to break it down. This is Rebecca. That's Rebe. That's Vanessa. And that's me right there.
We were so young.
You're so young. Look at my
¿Qué
hair, dude. I
pasó?
cannot grow my hair like that anymore. No me crece. And yeah, these were sessions. This was 2016. Alejandro, look at Alejandro.
Mira, Vanes, she's right
Vanessa.
there.
Dude, this is 2016. We're all right here at the bottom right. The first cohort on Borderclick. That's me with very long hair as well. I'm proud of it. I was proud of it. And so this is what the sessions looked at originally. What we did is that we wrote a curriculum with Vanessa's help as well and other folks to implement this project of giving cameras to folks that cross our border every day and just document. Just document and see. There was a lot of exploration, see where it goes, see what happens. And I was actually super excited. I didn't know that many. I didn't think that many people would be interested in the project, but it was immediate interest from a lot of people. I think our first session there was like 80 people or something like that. I don't know if you remember, Vanessa. It was like a packed room, and I was like, wow, like everybody's interested in this conversation, like, and it got me really, really, really excited. When we were doing this this curriculum development, I had never written a curriculum in my life. And I know for sure Rebecca had before, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know, Vanessa, where were you at that time, but I had never written a curriculum for a classroom. I had never taught anything. I never like taught. I mean, kind of taught a little bit of photography, like in the classrooms where I was saying with the refugee and immigrant communities, but I wasn't leading those classes. I wasn't leading any of those classes. I was like documenting photos, and here and there I would explain a couple of things, or help in the classroom, but I wasn't leading the class. I wasn't writing a curriculum. We were writing that curriculum. I remember telling that to Rebe, like, I told her, like, I don't know how should we go about this? And she's like, don't worry about it. Like, you have a lived experience. Like, you lived it, you went through it. Like, there's who better to ask, who better to write it with somebody who lived it. And I was like, you're right. Like, that's true. Like, because of academia not having like this understanding of how it should be, I felt intimidated, I didn't think I knew how to, I mean, I've always felt like that if I want to do something, I can do it. I've always felt like that. With all the insecurities that there are, I still believe, and I have faith. I have faith that things always, somehow, some way, things happen. And I don't like to live in fear. So even though I have to sometimes, but I don't like it. So I was like, okay, right. Like, I'm just going to dive into this thing and start writing about my lived experience, what it was like, and started mixing photography with it. And when we were developing a lot of the photography and part of the curriculum, like I said, it was based on my lived experiences, mostly on my lived experiences initially from my end, and then the experiences of Rebe and Vanessa helping us also understand a lot of that right before we started executing in the classroom. And what you see here are some of the participant photographs that were developed during those sessions. I believe it was the first session, well, the first cohort. Well, how many sessions was it? Like 14, 16 sessions or something like that?
Like 12.
12. I think it was like 12. Yeah, you're right, 12. And these were like, initially these sessions were supposed to be like an hour or two, and then these things would turn into 3 hours. Like, folks would just it was so cool to see everybody just happy to be in community. Everybody was just happy. Like, people just wanted to be there just to chill. A lot of folks were like, oh, I just got to work. I need to go to Tijuana. I just don't want to go to Tijuana right now. Like, I don't, because a lot of these sessions we were doing them in San Diego, but some were happening in Tijuana as well, because some folks couldn't come. And when we did sessions in Tijuana, people would show up that maybe were not necessarily part of Borderclick or not, we're not doing the curriculum from beginning to end, but that wasn't the point either. Like, the point wasn't like, oh, you need to start from session 1, session 12, and finish. Like, no. Like, we allowed people to jump in and out because that's the nature of being a transporter individual. Sometimes you can't always be where you want to be, And it was like I think it's one of the first times that we ever used like a Zoom to be teaching,
We weren't using Zoom. We were using
what was it? Zoom didn't exist.
Google Hangout at the time. Yeah. But I think at the time also with technology, we were ahead of the time, meaning that opening up these sessions online and for students to be able to engage. And I think for my students here today, start thinking about the practice of inclusion. And that many times is thinking outside the box and using, of course, various different resources, but thinking outside the box to make sure that everybody feels part of the learning process. So sometimes that will be with your students with disabilities. Other times it will be with transborder students and perhaps using technology to make sure that they can engage and be part of the learning process as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Vanessa, for jumping in. Please jump in whenever you want to. By the way, like, please, I actually prefer that. You have a lot of knowledge, and I forget a lot of things since you were so involved. I think it's important. So thank you, Vanessa. We go back. Okay, cool. And this understanding of community, finally, I for the first time it was happening for me. For the first time, I was feeling really, really proud of being a transporter individual. For a long time, like I said, I had to hide it. Like my parents would tell me, like, don't tell anybody you live in Tijuana, don't tell anybody you live in San Diego. Things like that. There's like the racism, there's classism, all of that stuff involved. You know, it still happens to this day. But I started like feeling a way about myself being around with other folks who felt the same way, who were also, and I started realizing, like, wait, these people are chingones, wait, these are people who are like para arriba, para abajo, like our community is super movido, you know, like Mexicanos in general, like Latinos, everybody like estábamos para arriba, para abajo, like moving around, getting stuff done, and that felt really inspiring. It felt really inspiring, and I was like, damn, like, you know, like I'm part of this. Like I was a participant myself in my own program. As I was teaching, I was learning, and we would modify the sessions all the time. We would constantly change the curriculum based on what people wanted to talk about because it was very open, you know. I know, Vanessa, you yourself taught a couple of lessons, I believe, no, like a couple of times as well. And this curriculum kept getting molded. We were just changing it. Having fun with it, being free with it, actually enjoying the process, and not necessarily worrying about the end all. As an artist, a lot of my work and the way I implement a lot of my work is heavily involved in the process. You need to trust the process. You need to trust the process. Sometimes you'll be stuck. And I still feel like that till this day. Like you'll be doing something and then be like, why am I doing this? Why am I going in this direction? Why don't I see a result? And sometimes it's like, like you need to look at the bigger picture. Just keep going forward and it'll happen. Like things will start showing up. I believe that anything can happen. Sometimes you might not like the way that it'll happen, but it'll happen. You know, it's not always the way you imagine it, but there's always these little things that connect that. And also, this curriculum was being developed. We're having fun with it. People were getting into it, and when we finally finished and we collected all the photography after 12 sessions that were like every 2 weeks. No, we would get together it was bi-weekly, right? I believe it was bi-weekly every 2 weeks, and which was good because it gave us plenty of time to like analyze the photos that we all took. We would take photos every week. We had a lesson, and I'm gonna dive a little bit more into what those lessons were right now, so you have an understanding. Well, I'm just gonna do it. Yeah. So you see some of these photographs. They have different names, right? And these are from different lessons that we did. This one is called Doble Identidad. The one on the top left, from a really good photographer. Her name's Alejandro Sarraga. She took this photograph, and what you see back there, the blue. Actually, can you see my arrow, by the way? Like if I'm sharing, is an arrow visible?
You can see it.
Yeah. This is the border. Right behind is the border. From her house, you could see the border. And that was a photograph that she took. She's a really good photographer. She was already a very experienced photographer when she joined the project, which actually I thought it was super cool that a lot of people that showed up already knew photo. They were teaching me photo, you know. This photograph on the right is Alejandro Martinez. This one, I forget what it was specifically about, but us who are transporter folks, I think that we can see different parts in these images and understand. Does anybody know what these are? Have you seen these? The blue photograph? Does anybody know or seen them before?
Or what do you think it is? Or what do you think is going on in this picture?
You don't have to say anything. I just want y'all to like look at it and think about it. A lot of these photographs do have these stories. This right here, why doesn't it get, well, I thought it would enlarge, doesn't get bigger. This photograph is this, like, I don't even know if it's still there. I think it's still there, but for a while it's no longer there, right?
No, it's changed a lot.
Oh God, it's been so long. It's been so long. So this was actually like a sculpture at the border when you would walk into Tijuana from San Isidro. And that path is no longer there. They switched it. But this was supposed to be welcoming. Like these things are like teeth, you know? And we would show it to people who were not from the region, and they'd be like they would see it as this aggressive thing. that was there, and it was an art installation that was supposed to be welcoming. And you know why it felt like a bunch of teeth? Because it was done by somebody who's not from the border. They brought in an artist from somewhere else to make a piece at the border, somebody who doesn't live the region, is clueless to the region, and that's what they came up with. I think the photograph is better than the actual piece, the actual teeth-like installation. I think the photograph actually makes it look better than it did.
It does. And interestingly, here in the Imperial Valley, Mexicali borderlands, we have something more or less happen for the mall that was created, the outlet. It's an outlet mall, but here the weather is very extreme. So it's either, you know, super hot, like dangerously hot, or in the winter it's very cold, but ideally a mall should be closed. It should be kind of like a building or a huge building. But that mall is open air. And I think there was a colleague of mine, Melissa Villarreal, coordinator for the food pantry, she said, or somebody said, I think she's mentioned it, that's what happens when you have somebody that's not from the region that you know, has a hand in creating sometimes spaces, but I think it falls into a lot of other things, whether it's be policy or practices. And just going back a little bit to what you've shared, and it's a lot, but something that I think resonates with me, but also resonates with my students here today, is again the that nobody better than you to do this work. So no better than a transborder artist to do art with transborder students and to collaborate with transborder educators as well. And also for my students here, no better critically conscious border educators than you who live, learn, study at the borderlands and know what that means. My class is actually working on a photo voice autoethnography, where at the end of phases of this, we've been kind of scaffolding in every assignment to develop this autoethnography that is theirs to either just have for the class and, you know, to get that grade, or if they want to share it at conferences or publish and start to develop more of that research and that theory. And yes, art, because we use photography to be able to teach about what is it to live at the borderlands, but also to be a critically conscious border educator. They already have that lived experience. Now it's just a matter of understanding the theory, literature, but also praxis and the practice, which is what this session I hope that everybody can take away, which is how you can create these spaces of inclusion with practices, in this case, art.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. And yes, you have to be the one to do it. Like, it has to be your community. Like Vanessa said, like, you are the scholars to do this. Like, this is what you know best. Like, nobody can tell you what it's like to live this life. Like, you live it. I'm not here to tell you like how to do this. I'm just trying to share with you how I did it, you know, in different era, different time, 2016, almost 10 years. Like, what I'm trying to teach is that I'm trying to show you that's how you can just like actually do it without all the fluff, you know, that nitty gritty, how to actually get it done. A lot of the people also in Borderclick, a lot of them were not photographers either. I know, Vanessa, you didn't consider yourself a photographer, and you took a bunch of photos, really good ones too. Like, you know, like there was all these folks who didn't consider themselves photographers, but through this process of like going through the curriculum, we a lot of us became better photographers. I think everybody became a better photographer. We would mix, so the way that we actually, the actual way that it worked is that we would mix art, academia, and also talked a little bit about like history of the border in order for us to do art. One of this photograph, if you see on the right where the people are shaking hands, that was from, and also the one right here down in the bottom, which is Playas of Tijuana, and this one right here too, is about landscapes. And I'm going to give you that as an example. We had a session about landscape photography. So landscape photography, you document like landscapes, no? And in the session, we would look at different photographers who did landscapes. But then in everything, we had to look at people who were doing it in this region. Again, people who were doing it here. We started looking at photographers who were local photographers from Tijuana. People had been doing it for years before us, documented, like people like Norma Iglesias, who was like doing a lot of really good work. She still does. looking at what they were doing, and then when we were looking at the history of photography in the region, this is why it was one of my favorite lessons. Like, well, what was the first photograph of the West ever taken? Which was the first photograph of this region I'm talking about my region, Tijuana, San Diego, like this borderland region. Like, what was the first photograph? And we found out I found out because I learned it for the first time, is that these photographs were used to invite folks to move to the West. So the first photographs were to get folks to come visit the West and to buy, well, it was more for white people, like come move over here, like open land, basically. That's how photography was used. But it was, I believe the photographer who was taking the photos is like, he's actually like a really good photographer. And he did these amazing, beautiful landscapes of like the canyons and stuff like that. Like amazing, amazing landscape photography, but it was used to sell for commercial use. To this day, we have photography used to sell land in this region. It's like a practice that keeps happening. And it was and that was the first photograph of the West, was to invite folks. And then the next part of the documentation of the West was the Mexican-American War of this region. There's postcards of the Tijuana, San Diego region of people being hung, being hung, publicly hung, and people fighting in the war, like actual photographs of that you could buy the postcard because they would sell it for tourism. They still use this region for tourism for white folks, like, oh, come watch the Mexican-American War. And people would sit down and watch people fight. And they sold postcards. Like, they have these photographs, like the original photographs are in the San Diego, I believe it's called San Diego History Museum. No, not History Museum. It's an archive that they have at the ballpark in San Diego. You can see them. And I saw them and I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. I just didn't know this. I just never looked into it. And then after we learned the history and we saw these beautiful photographs, we'd be like, okay, now you go take photos of your landscape. Like, what is your landscape? Like, you document your landscape the way that you want to see it, not the way that other folks came and sold it for you. And we started getting these landscape photographs from people of the region, and we started looking at it different. One challenge that I had for folks, you don't see any border walls here in any of these photos, by the way. And that was a challenge that I had for folks. How can we talk about the border without actually using the wall? How like, in a way, like, we wanted to like break it down, at least in our space, the way we were doing it. Like, we were not going to acknowledge, not that we were not going to acknowledge it, but we didn't give that power to the actual wall, you know, like a physical structure, which is just a bunch of cement and wire that somebody came up with, imagined it, and put it. It's an extension of violence. It's not this like super complicated thing to understand. Oh, it's a wall that divides people. It's straightforward, you know, that's what they want it to be. So we went around it by thinking, how do we make work doing that? And the lesson of landscapes was one of those. We talked a lot about identity. I'm going to jump into this part, which is more Borderclick. This is outside my website. This is the Borderclick archive. It's a living archive. We call it a living archive because it's constantly changing and adding stuff to it. This is one of the lessons that we did. Remember these, Vanessa, symbolic paper abstracts?
Yeah.
So these are literally just crumpled paper with a light box. And this was another lesson. The lesson was how to use a light box. So we talked about how it felt to cross a border. That was like the concept, like, how do you feel when you cross a border? So this is what everybody did. And they folded papers, and then we just like took like super deep shadows. Look at this, like, look at this photograph. It's just a piece of crumbled paper. But I think it looks super cool and abstract, you know. I love these. I love these depth of field. You can see all these things. Depth of field is like the technique that we use in photography. And we would talk about photo techniques while doing this, but also like analyzing our process. And I'm talking about the technicalities of actually doing, you know. And those are some examples of some of the lessons. And you can see there's more participant images here. It's the same ones. Okay, sorry, my bad. If you go to our Instagram, you can find a lot more photography as well. I've been updating this website for a while. So, because there's so much content. I have a whole hard drive full of Borderclick stuff.
And for those of you who want to see more of this work, you can check out Borderclick at
it's just
Borderclick.
Borderclick.org. Yeah, Borderclick.org.
But also for Instagram.
Oh yeah, it's just Borderclick.
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 Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so with those photographs, with all that work that we did, the final part of it was to exhibit it. Like, we need to show it somewhere. It needs to be seen. We designed this installation, this art installation. It's called A Donde Vas. and they're all just photographs from the participants. Vanessa's right there. Photographs from the participants printed on backpacks. These backpacks represent every single one of us participants, and I think a backpack is a symbolism that we all understand as students, educators, and just folks crossing the border. So it's pretty straightforward, simple concept. It doesn't need to be too complicated to be important or to make sense. Some people want to get too complicated. I don't like that. Sometimes I would do overcomplicate myself, and I hate it. I always come back to the simple.
This so this has been, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please, no, go ahead, please go ahead.
I was going to say this has been a really great conversation, and it's hard to believe that we only have 20 minutes before we wrap up. I wanted to ask if you can tell us more about your experience working with high school students, because a lot of our critically conscious border educators here in this class also will be embarking in working with K through 12, and a lot of future educators with high school students whom actually a lot of my students are already working with high school students. How was that like? And tell us about your program there.
Yes, and this is a perfect transition moment. After we exhibited the work and we showcased Borderclick and it got a lot of attention. It was a successful project. The funding was, we were able to get more funding. And my dream was always to get into high schools. I was like, yo, like I said earlier, like I wanted to reach the young person that I was. I wanted to be that instructor. I wanted to have that classroom for the young person that I wanted to be when I was in high school. And we reached out we got a grant again from the California Arts Council. The logistics behind it, applied for it, fiscal sponsor, this other organization, applied for the grant, did the same work, showcase. It was such a good project that they gave us the funding, they awarded us the full funding. And I wanted to get into classrooms. And I reached out to a school. I literally just sent them an email and I hit them up and I was like, hey, my name is I have funding from the state, or I think it was the city. I don't remember if it was California Arts Council. I think it was California Arts Council. And I was like, I have funding and I want to do this photo project, Transborderism. And I literally just emailed them and they were like Tommy, who's a good friend now. He was like, yeah, come through. I had a friend of mine also reach out to him. Like I was looking at different schools and I really wanted to work with this school. It was like Mac charter school because there was a lot of youth who were transporter. That's what I wanted. I was like, okay, I need to be in a transporter program. And there was plenty of students. And a lot of these students were students who like had also like maybe had been kicked out of high school or didn't fit or were like making up credits or like they migrated. So they lost a year, stuff like that, you know? So this was that type of school. When we did the first, how we recruit the students in the high school, this is high school kids, like they get bored fast. And I was like, okay, this is not gonna be the same type of like program. There's gonna be a challenge. And I was into that challenge. When we did the first day after they gave us, the director was like, yes, let's do this project. You have to do everything. I was like, we'll do everything. We have the funding, we'll pay for everything. And we literally just walked into everybody's classroom, me and Alejandro. We just like went to people's classes, like, hey, what's up? We're like a bunch of high school kids. And we're like, hey, like, you guys like photography? That's how we started all that conversation, through photography. And I think the arts is a great way to do a lot of things as an excuse. You know, like what we really wanted to do was like deeper than just photography, but that was a way to get people to easily understand, which is why art is good. It's a good tool for these kind of things. For critical change and for activism, art is always one of the best tools there is. And that's how we recruited students. Like, hey, like, does anybody like photography? And I was like, hey, has anybody ever heard of the word transborder? A lot of students didn't have no idea. And I was like, hey, how many folks cross the border on a daily basis? Some people would be like, and I was like, they didn't have to answer because people didn't want to talk about it. And I was like, well, if you do, like, we're going to start class this date. We literally went to every single classroom and a bunch of high school kids showed up for sure. A lot of them, the school was great enough to give them school credit. So if they took the class, they could graduate faster. So students showed up and the curriculum, it was much shorter class. We had to modify the curriculum for students, for high school students. A lot of the language that we had developed was too complicated. It was too academic, a lot of it as well. So we had to simplify a lot of that, a lot of these ideas and conversations. And these are some of the photographs that came from there. From that project, we used a lot of, we did the landscapes lesson, for example. We did the paper ones as well. We did the light boxes to see these beautiful landscapes. We talked a lot about identity, and a lot of these younger folks. I feel like it was like a lot of fear. It was a lot of fear because a lot of them, I know some of them told me, some of them didn't have to tell me. They were undocumented. Some of them had family on both sides, some, you know, and they didn't want to like necessarily say that. So it turned into this safe space for high school students. It was super laid back, the class. Like, you didn't have to show up to every single class. I didn't fail a single student. That's a rule number one. Nobody fails that class. I never told them that, but I'm not gonna fail anybody. Like, I'm not gonna do what they did to me. So I was like, no, there's no way. Like, and being like that, being open to that for youth, being remembering where you came from, like, it was I think is what really made this program successful. And thinking about like the actual way of doing it, you know, because the curriculum, we got modified, it made it simpler, shorter sessions. These are like the little technical things, you know, how to actually implement it. But what kept folks coming back was that community space that we have built. And I told them like, yo, like, and I would kind of like show them the work and show them my work. But we built trust. We had a lot of trust exercises. Oh, technique that I love for teaching: sit in a circle. This is one of the, if you can take something from this whole conversation, start your class sitting in a circle. If you can do that, it's one of the best things you can do. I think it changes completely the dynamic. It removes this hierarchical thing where I have to be standing in the front. Like, we're all, you know, we come this that's something I want to give. It's like it's a teaching technique, if you will. We did that in all these sessions with the students, also with the other ones before, but it was high school kids sitting in circles. I let them eat because it was an after school program. I would let them eat whatever they wanted, except when we had cameras and technical stuff, there couldn't be any food. I would brought in equipment. We did a lot of hands-on work, not as much theory. We had because for the other one, we had a lot of theory and a lot of hands-on work, but it was like long sessions. But here was like a lot of like, just do it and taking photos. A lot of the things that the students, I know for a fact, because I still have I'm still in contact with some of these students. A lot of them didn't know or understand how important this project later became for them. A lot of them were just trying to graduate, just trying to do some photos here and there. And it made me really happy to know that it actually like did something for them, you know. And that was just being in community. That's where, like, I don't know what systems you plan on teaching in, what kind of high schools you plan on teaching in. And I don't know what other schools expect from instructors, but the school really treated me really, really well. That year they gave me the teacher of the year award in their school, and I wasn't even staff or anything, you know. I was super happy for that. There was like a whole ceremony. They were like giving out awards, and somebody called my name, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And it was just because I was in community with these kids, with these youth, you know. And I mean, I don't know how, like, well, yeah. I'm just thinking of it, like, I'm thinking about it, making a little bit emotional. It was
I think also just again to highlight that for many of these students, this might have been one of the very first times that they felt like they belong, like they felt included and being part of an inclusive space, of course. And where they felt like they can talk about their lives and experiences at the borderlands. And specifically for transborder students, at times we have to kind of like live in the shadows. And unfortunately, although Josemar, you're doing this work and I'm doing this work, and we're now creating these amazing critically conscious border educators for this work, but the reality is that there are more students than not. There are more students that actually don't get to be a part of this amazing experience. And the thing is that if it weren't for this, or because of this, maybe this is one of the first times that they feel like they belong and can talk about an experience that is part of their every single day. But yet when you arrive to the classroom, it's invisible and almost not, you can't almost always, you can't really disclose or share.
Yeah, and this space was that. And I think that's, like I said, what made it successful. I invited a lot of guest speakers. Vanessa was one of the guest speakers in the session as well. That was another way of showing these younger kids, like, hey, there's other people who lived your same experience that are older now and live a different life. Like, they a lot of them for the first time had ever met like an artist, you know, like when they met like Daniel Ruanova, who's like a super amazing contemporary artist from Tijuana, Meli Barragan, Lorraine Rihan, like all these folks. They were like, these students were like for the first time seeing these things, and being expressed like that with a lot of pride, you know, being aware, like, hey, like, this is actually like a really good thing. Like, the border's not here. Like, yeah, the border's here to stop us, but it's actually an amazing tool that we can also use in our benefit as much as we have to and as much as we can. And I think that was the simple thing about the high school. That was like the only simple thing about it. They just wanted a space to be in. And I think that's the best way you can educate anything, unless it's like math or something like that, where you have to like be on the numbers. Like I get it. For these types of spaces, I think it's really good to come in with that mindset, be loving, be caring, you know, about the folks, because they're there to learn from you, and you need to be aware of what you're teaching. Even though you might think folks are not paying attention, younger kids, they definitely are. You're standing in front of them. There is a hierarchy whether you want to or not, which is why I say sit in circles. And they do look up to you, and they did look up to me, and I felt a certain way, and I was proud to show them like, hey, yo, like I got kicked out of high school. Like I make art, I make music, like I have a job, like I work, I hustle, like, and I'm here to kick it with all y'all too, like I teach you photo and whatever. Like I said, I didn't fail a single one of those students, you know. After that, we did develop a fellowship program where some of the students were able to apply, and some of them had never heard the word fellowship in their life. So I was like, okay, this is what a fellowship is. We took them to SDSU. Was it? No, yeah, SDSU campus. Some of them had never been to a university in their life. The SDSU campus in San Diego, like, and things like that, like giving these experiences to these younger kids and be like, yo, like it matters. Like somebody else cares. Like we're in the same room, we're doing the same work, and I wanted to inspire them. I really wanted to inspire them. I just felt like I had this tool and I'm grateful for what I have. So I want to give it back. You know, I'm grateful for all the scholars, people like Vanessa, people like Reve, all the artists who believed in the project, who are still involved. I'm grateful for all of them. So I'm just giving it out, you know. Our curriculum is like whatever, you know, like I'm not attached to it. I'm happy to share with all y'all more lessons if you want. Like, I don't mind. You can take it all and do whatever you want with it. Like use it, you know. I know we're running out of time, so I'm gonna close. And I don't know well, you'll tell me right now, Vanessa, but if you want me to add anything else, but something I do want to say, thinking about like where we're at now, talking a little bit more of what the future and what I'm envisioning for Borderclick. I do want to jump back into high schools. Vanessa and I have talked about that multiple times. So if that does come up, when it does happen, like if anybody in this room wants to get involved, like hit up Vanessa. Like I want to take Borderclick to your campus. Like I'm really interested in doing that. Maybe teach it myself. I don't know. I would love for other folks to learn it and teach it as well, because it's not my curriculum. You know, I believe it's everybody's. And right now, kind of like what talking more about art, jumping into the art aspect of that. Like I said, we did a lot of fellowships, and I'm in contact with some of these students. This photograph on the top left, where you see this young man inside the trash can, I'm going to show you kind of what I'm doing with it. This is a photograph that we took together, and his name is Jorge Isordia. He now does photography. Like we were his first photo class ever, and now he's like super into photography. He took that photo. I grabbed this photo again. I'm gonna make it large. I grabbed this photo, and I started working with artificial intelligence. And we're using artificial intelligence now to create new images of reimagining what the border is like. I'm gonna go real quick right here. This is just me talking about the future of what is actually happening right now. I want to take this new tool, not just photo and video, but I want to start using artificial intelligence to implement it into a new Borderclick curriculum. That's my hope. Hopefully it'll be with the high school students. This is the other photograph. Yep. Sorry. Real quick. Okay, this one. And then, what's going on? Zoom is not letting me. Okay. Apologize. That photo, and then this photo. You see the differences, right? So this is where I'm trying to go now, experimenting as an artist. Artificial intelligence is like the newest tool that there is to make art. I'm not afraid of it at all. Actually, I want to use it in our favor. This is hopefully where I would like to take the curriculum in the future. If anybody's interested, throw out some ideas out there. That's it. I think that's it for the presentation. I hope I said what y'all wanted to hear or understand. If there's any questions, like hit me up, or right now, I don't know, Vanessa. Thank you.
Yeah,
everybody.
absolutely. If you don't mind typing your email in the chat box here for my students and community to be able to reach out if they want to keep in touch and collaborate. In regards to bringing this work to the Valley, absolutely. I think we need to collaborate and we need to expand this along the borderlands and specifically at the Imperial Valley, Mexicali borderlands. We also have a great transborder population and students who cross the border every day. So this is a great opportunity for them to, feel included and feel like they belong as well. So count on that. Luis Hernandez and I are definitely want to reach out and see if we can explore bringing this work here. And for our critically conscious border educators, if this is something that maybe you want to be a part of or you want to collaborate in, also don't be afraid to reach out to Josemar or to me.